All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to another sesh. I'm going to give it just a minute to let everybody join. But for those of you logging in now, hello. Thank you for joining us. I wish that I could play some, music or some elevator music for you, but I still haven't figured it out. Micah, do you got any thoughts on how we can hack the system here?
Not yet. I mean, it's a very narrow window of royalty-free, boring intro music that can be identified for us exclusively.
Maybe that's the next thing we do is just start a band. Simon created a image that we were sort of sharing internally from Imagine last year. I'll have to put it in the feed. Actually, it looks kind of like a boy band. I mean,
Yeah, put it
I
in
guess
there.
you would say a man band, given my age. But
It did look suspiciously like a boy band. I think it's you who looked like the boy band. Everyone else just looked like they were posing for a photo.
I I'm gonna give it
Speaking of
one more.
Imagine, we should be
Yeah.
we should be promoting this, right? Imagine's coming up much sooner this year.
Yes. Yes. I'm excited. We're in full Imagine mode. June 11th, 12th, right? Am I got that right?
I think so.
Yeah. And for those of that you were on the line already, that will be we've got early bird registration going on right now. So grab your tickets and get it. While we wait for a few more
I
to
will
join.
tease. Let me tease a
Yeah.
couple things real quick.
Yeah.
We're going to be showing up with, I think, 3 bot games challenges this year. So we've got some really good ones dialed in. We also are going to have a new bot games event that we're calling Bot Games Lightning. And I don't think anyone outside of like a very small set of people have actually seen this yet. But we've gamified the process of creating a bot. And it's going to get really competitive and it's going to be really fun to see people solve these challenges. This is the type of game where you just walk up to an iPad, you use an iPad to play this game where you're building a bot. And we're going to have a scoreboard and we're going to have a leaderboard and we're going to recognize people who are the fastest at doing this. Um, we'll be previewing it at Google Next, which is coming up April 9th through 11th. So if you're going to be at Google Next, you'll get to see the new Bot Games Lightning event. We also have a really cool lab event that myself and Max and Aaron on our team have been working on. So really excited for that too. All right, done with my
That's gonna be
plugs.
some good stuff. That's gonna be some really good stuff. I can't wait to see that. As you say that with the iPad, all I can imagine is a bunch of toddlers in the back of their Suburbans doing your game. So you're gonna put this in the
That's
App
right. I
Store?
should have my kids. I'll have my kids test it and see.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be really fun.
I mean, if you see a bunch of people on the airplane on the way there, like, swiping.
Yep.
Um, all right, guys. Well, let's get the show on the road because as usual, I will talk too much and we'll run out of time. As I mentioned, thank you everybody for joining today. We're really excited. Another great topic on our continuing series around AI, generative AI, and automation, and the combined superpowers. Last year at Imagine, we just talked about Imagine for a minute, but last year at Imagine, our friend Max Cassidy did a session that was SRO, standing room only, around prompt engineering and prompt engineering specifically for automators. Since then, there's been so many updates, developments, improvements, enhancements, and all these things. We wanted to revisit the topic with Max and get some more insights and share these with you. Especially, obviously, not everybody on the show or joining us for this was at Imagine. Although I do encourage you to try to get there. So, um, as usual, you've heard Micah is here, and Micah, just quick check in. How you doing, bud? What have you been up to?
Good. Like I said, we're full force in getting things ready for Google Next. We've got some really great sessions coming up for that event. We'll be doing one of 4 Google Lab events that will be hosted in a special hands-on area. And so we're really excited for people to get hands-on with that. We're going to be doing a generative AI powered automation build through that lab experience, and you're going to get hands-on with API tasks and process composer and task bots and the form builder and document automation and validation. So lots of components that you'll get hands-on with there to solve a bot games challenge, which will be really fun. So we're really excited for that one. It's been really fun to put that together and work with the Google team to make sure that we're building a really fun and like really engaging experience for people who are going to be at our lab. So super looking forward to that. And then also prepping everything we're going to be doing for Imagine, which is coming up, like you said, in June.
Also looking forward to speaking with our guest today. Max, how are you, my friend?
Hey, I am well, thank you. Thank you for having me, of course. It's an absolute pleasure.
It's good to hear your voice and have you on the show. As I mentioned, your breakout at Imagine last year was extremely popular. We do have I think a replay of that on YouTube, by the way, and we'll put that link in the comments. But also, before we dive in, I want to remind you guys, this is meant to be interactive. So at any point during the show, raise your hand. There's a little icon I think you can click there to come and ask your questions live. So let's make this interactive. To Micah's point, this is your opportunity to ask questions live and in the flesh. So encourage you guys to do that. So Micah, Max, as I mentioned, since Imagine last year, it's been a little bit, but it seems like every day there's new announcements, new headlines. Obviously, still a ton of chatter around generative AI, automation. We've made some huge announcements. We're sharing some of the wins, the massive wins that our customers are experiencing already. But there's this idea, I think we came up on a conversation recently of around AI and AI adoption, and it's an interesting concept. So is AI a competitive advantage, or is it already becoming table stakes? Micah, go.
Well, I think that the way that we look at this is from a couple different lenses. Number one, we see that in some recent survey results, 85% of organizations surveyed indicate that they have at least started adopting AI in some way. 47.5, if I'm going to be exact, of those already have some AI use cases in production. And this is coming from a Retool report that was the state of AI. And of those that do have a AI use case in production already, 66% have at least one internal use case, which means something like, hey, I need help from the IT service desk, or I have a question about HR benefits or something like that. And 43% have an external use case that's live already, which may be some kind of support agent that's available on the website. It may be something that's assisting its call center representatives. So it's really interesting to see that so many organizations have gone forward with this already. I'd like to hear from the people who are in our chat. Have you gotten started with an AI solution? Are you still waiting? Because I think that there's this potential of two things that could be happening. And part of that is, mistake number one, which I can be losing a competitive advantage by just sticking my head in the sand here and assuming that this automation plus Gen AI thing is all just going to blow over and people will forget about it next year. And I don't think that's the case, right? Generative AI has proven to be quite powerful, and it's an ever evolving field that seems to be maturing even more quickly than anticipated. I saw something about GPT-5 kind of having some results leaked and a release that will be sometime this year. So that's going to be insane. But on the other side, I think that we can't make the mistake of automatically trusting the results of generative AI and assuming that they're better than they are, right? Like, I'm not going to build an automation right now that just sends emails to all of my most important customers, because I need to validate those results, right? Like, sometimes there are possibilities for hallucinations or things that it doesn't get right. And so I think the important thing is trying to find that balance between sticking my head in the sand and saying, oh, this is all just going to go away, I'm going to let other people lead the way in this, and diving in head first and saying, I'm going to trust this to handle all of my customer interactions and I'm just going to sit back with my hands up, right? So I think we have to find that balance between the two.
Yeah, agreed. I think with regards to that balance, I I think I might have said this before in the show, but I was talking to somebody recently, and it's, in my opinion, even if or when GPT-5 comes out and the next version of Claude and everything else, um, I right now I still look at Gen AI. There's two things I look at. One is I look at like a smart, like a really smart middle schooler, if that makes sense. Like it'll do sort of the technical things that you ask of it, but you've got to be more specific if you want to make it more sort of probably what we would expect from somebody, at university level or professional level, sort of in terms of creating content, for instance. This is the one instance. The other thing that I expect in sort of setting expectations and goals is that if you can get me to 80% of an outcome, that's really good. That still saves me a ton of time. And so right now that's where my bar is at. Where's your bar at in with regards to generative AI, just for in creating content, for instance?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I think we still need human oversight and human in the loop. Not to just shamelessly plug a platform, but that's why I think Copilot is really important right now. I'm not
Mhm.
going to just implement a generative AI solution and let it rip and blindly let it start making decisions and sending responses and things like that. The We'll talk about this here in a second with Max, but like I think the best way to get started with this is just to start to implement some of those first solutions and then still do things with a manual oversight in place. And I want to keep track of things like how often is the user and my generative AI solution in agreement with a decision, with a data extraction, with a data point, whatever it is. And I'm going to keep track of that so that over time I can make sure that as I make tweaks and changes or possibly change which model I'm using, that I'm continuously improving and I'm getting better. And I get to a point where I can maybe establish some trust in certain situations for generative AI to start to handle some of these scenarios more autonomously. And then I can have my users focus more exclusively on, let's say, the outliers to my data set or the situations where more investigation is needed. And that way, I've got people focused on the right work and I've got automations focused on the right work. All right, we may have lost Gabe, but I want to keep things going from here, right? So, Max, tell me a little bit about how you're seeing organizations get started with generative AI. And specifically, I know this topic is about prompting. How are we seeing organizations get started with this, and what are you guiding people to do?
Well, when it comes to generative AI and we start really integrating it inside our automations, if we look at it from a product perspective, I always say start with them low hanging fruits. You want to start really tailoring your prompts and tailoring your automations to really get the most out of generative AI. Now, luckily for us, we do have a few components up our sleeve that seem to be going in the right direction. From a product perspective, I'd say the easiest way, and what I always tell people to get started, is Automation Copilot for Automators. It's easy and it's low lift, and it actually allows us to be able to start crafting automations with a prompt. So this means if I know in my automation I need to open an Excel file and then I also need to open up a web page, I can craft a prompt that states I need to open up and perform these two actions. And then, just like magic, them two actions appear within my workflow. And if I tailor the prompt correctly, I can also then start to configure these actions as well. That can benefit anyone from a seasoned developer to really start speeding up development, all the way through to a citizen developer to actually leverage this to some level of training. On top of this, I'd tell people do not stop there. We also have document automation, of course. In here, we now have the ability to start processing unstructured documents, but capturing data based from the answer of a prompt. We don't know, or we no longer need to start inputting multiple aliases in multiple examples in order to be able to dictate what it is we're after. We're able to use the prompt in the answer of a prompt to gain the data that we want from our documents.
Sounds like something I could do.
Oh, definitely.
That's a
Luckily
pretty
for us,
low
it's
bar, by the
really
way.
low hanging. You'll see it guide you through the entire process. And actually, it is as easy as creating the prompt. The hardest part of it is crafting that prompt.
And that's why we're here to
I
talk
really
about
like,
some of those best practices, right?
yeah, and I like both of those recommendations because neither of those require me as an organization to establish another relationship with another vendor to provide me with Gen AI capabilities, right? Both of those things are happening directly through Automation Anywhere's platform. We're handling the connection to the generative AI models. This isn't something where you have to then go out and set up a relationship with OpenAI, set up a relationship with Microsoft, set up a relationship with AWS, though you can do those things, and we'll talk about that as you continue to mature your generative AI practice with automation. But both of those are really easy things that you can do directly in the platform. And one other thing I would mention on top of the Copilot, what do we call it? Copilot for Automators, right? Where we're describing the kind of automation we want built, and it's essentially doing that magic for us. As a part of that, there's a feature that's called Suggest Next Best Action. And so if I don't know exactly what I'm doing on my build, right? Like I'm kind of new to all of this, and I know I need to open an Excel file, but I don't know what should come after that. Suggest next best action will actually suggest to me what actions may follow this one based on a library of thousands and thousands of automations that have been built. And so it's going to tell me, hey, you've just opened an Excel file. Usually, what happens after an Excel file open is, let's say, a loop where I'm going to start to loop through all of the lines of that sheet, right? That's a suggestion that's coming to me. And if I'm not terribly familiar about what should come next, this is going to tell me. And again, this is a great use of generative AI to make my process of developing an automation a little bit easier.
Yeah, I love that. And this is like sort of that feedback loop just within the um is model training might not be the right phrase, but it's the idea of using metadata to then inform and make this whole thing smarter, right?
Yeah, we're leveraging the power of, millions and millions of automation executions that have taken place on our cloud. And all of that has been anonymized, and we're using that data to help make better decisions for you as you continue to build out automations.
I'm curious too with the audience if anybody's using automation Copilot for Automators or Doc Auto, as I like to call it, because I like Spider-Man. But with those, I mean, Max, give me some examples within each of what we're talking about here and how generative AI really comes into play with document automation and automation Copilot. And Micah mentioned a couple things, but let's dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, of course. Well, when it comes to any of these, it's all about harnessing the power of the natural language processing and being able to make sure that the prompt within generative AI includes the components that you need. And we'll touch on these components shortly. But if we're looking at, let's say, document automation, for example, the generative AI works by analyzing the uploaded document, whether it's unstructured or structured. It will extract the relevant information based on the prompt rather than just the field label. So it also lets you manage the output data. Now, what I mean by this is if I set up my learning instance and I want to capture only the postcode of an address, I would normally need to capture the full address and then either apply rules or manipulate it using automation. Well, now I can set up my field as address, but when I enter my prompt, which is I need the postcode from the shipping address, it means the outcome won't be the entire address, but only the postcode. Now, of course, like Micah was saying, with instances like this, it is important to keep that human validation in place, the human in the loop, just to confirm the data that is coming through. And again, make sure that you are testing this countless of times. It's no good just putting this through 2, 3 single tests and then you get the same outcome of all of them. You really want to start pushing this through 15, 20 times at the absolute minimum just to get a benchmark of how your responses are going to come and to keep that structure within your prompts. And again, we'll touch on how we can do this later on. But if we take a look at Automation Copilot for Automators, now this utilizes generative AI to interpret text instructions and suggest the next action in real time. It makes automation development smoother and more efficient. This functions means that, well, Let's say that I need to navigate to open a specific Excel data set, then navigate to a web page. I can craft a prompt that outlines what I want to do. So for this, it would be exactly that. I need to open up my Excel data set, then I need to open up Google Chrome and navigate to this website here. Assuming the prompt is crafted correctly, it will be the correct actions configured into my workbench. Now, as Micah was saying as well, the suggest next action. What this will allow us to do is analyze the previous actions that we've actually used and suggest a next action. So in this circumstance where I've opened up my data set and I've opened up my web page, my suggested actions would probably be a loop to go through my data and a recorder action within my loop to start interacting with that web page and process the data in some way. And of course, the way that it actually presents these next actions to you is a simple pop-up box, normally with 2 to 3 actions in there as a suggestion. And it's as simple as ticking them or unticking them and pressing that OK button to have them inserted directly into your workflow.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Can you hear me? I'm having issues today. I don't know. Is LinkedIn acting up today, or I don't know. But as you were talking, Max, I was just thinking I need to clone your voice too for some stuff I need to do. But anyway, yeah. Thanks for that. I'm reminded, by the way, I'm actually working on a demo right now that'll be up on YouTube that shows document automation in action, as well as automation copilot embedded in a supply chain workflow for a real customer. So it's exciting stuff. And again, this stuff is this isn't smoke and mirrors or vaporware. These things are happening right now, right?
They are indeed. They're available. And we even have a few videos that are going to be released that's going to be going over all of these features, showing you exactly how you can get hands-on with them. And that's all going to be within the Automation Anywhere University.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Max has already taken my job as shameless plugger here. But, no, there's a ton of resources. And in today's day, with things moving so fast, I think having these examples and this tutorials and everything else, obviously super helpful. And as we mentioned at the top, even somebody like me can do this, which is awesome, which is saying a lot. Now let's just zoom out for a second, Micah. When we think about, and Micah and Max, when we think about how we integrate generative AI, we sort of talked about this idea of table stakes, competitive advantage. But let's talk about not just the developer, but this sort of the relationship between the business user, the developer, the function, and IT or the COE. And we think about how generative AI can benefit both. What are some of the considerations there, and how to optimize the outcomes for both the business user or the stakeholder, as well as the developer?
I think it's important to make sure that as we get started with our generative AI powered automation journey, you'll probably see some echoes from when you started your original automation journey, which is some of the basic stuff that we want to start with some quick wins. We want to make sure that we're setting realistic expectations, right? We're going to make sure that we're not taking on a opportunity that is way more complex and way more risky and has way higher visibility than our program is ready for. So we want to think about, like, what are the kinds of generative AI types of problems that I want to be solving as my organization gets started with our generative AI journey. And I think Max already mentioned two of those, which are, like, one, using generative AI to empower developers to move more quickly. I think part of that comes by way of Copilot for Automators. Part of that comes by way of using generative AI to help with the code that I may be using for JavaScript or Python or things that I'm adding within my automations. And then I think on the other side, we want to think about what are the first types of automations that I can be building that can be powered by generative AI and the kinds of problems that I'm solving. And so we like to think about this in a couple ways. And I'm going to preview this framework for you here. This is hot off the press. We've been working on this for a little bit. But I think of it in three different ways. I have the first T, which is the type of problem I'm solving, the second T, which is the technology that is powering that solution, and then the third T, which is the talent that's required and the talent that's involved, right? So I'll give a good example here. One of the first types of problems I may consider solving with generative AI might be something around classification, right? Classification of incoming emails, classification of documents, classification of messages, communication from customers, things like that. I'm classifying those so that I can eventually get to the point where I'm doing some kind of extraction or some kind of sentiment analysis, right? The technology that powers classification or even extraction is really going to be pre-trained, trusted, off-the-shelf models. We're saying that because as I'm just getting started with generative I don't want to immediately run to, hey, I've got to fine tune this model so that I can have it do what I want to, right? I want to use something that's off the shelf. I want to limit my complications, limit the variables that are involved for my first use cases. This first use case is probably also going to be powered by Copilot. It's going to be powered by potentially document automation. It's going to be powered by API tasks. So those are the different technologies that I'm going to use. And the final T, when I talked about talent, is where does the human get involved here? And as we get started with generative AI use cases, we want to think about having human oversight on 100% of our transactions. Because, like I mentioned earlier, one huge mistake is thinking this technology is better than it is right now, right? I
Mhm.
can't just let these decisions go completely unchecked. I can't let any of these, like, even if it's just classification, I want to make sure that the classification that I'm doing is working properly. And so I'm going to be having that feedback loop where I'm trying to see, are we having errors? Are we having learnings? Are the decisions that we're making from a generative AI solution matching what the human says is the correct answer? And if it's not, then I need to refeed some of that information back to my development team as we refine and retool some of our prompts.
I like the three T's. We'll have to put those in the feed and figure out how we get those out to the. I imagine there's probably some more a deeper dive coming on in the community maybe or something around the three T's.
That's going to be at Imagine. We're going to do a deep dive into this, but yeah, that was a preview, just a teaser.
This is why you folks show up. You know, you never know what kind of gems you're gonna get, right? Easter eggs abound as we're heading into Easter. This is fantastic. So as you think about that, okay, so let's zoom in now again. We're here to talk about prompt engineering specifically. That's the title of this week's episode. Max, when we talk about prompt engineering, two things. One, are we talking like, well, I guess we can talk about both, but were we talking about sort of prompt engineering for an output, say you've got an automation in customer service where you want to give Gen AI automated responses to help expedite a solution for a customer, or are we talking about prompt engineering for development or both?
We're talking about both. When we get into the context of prompt engineering, it all revolves around crafting prompts that effectively guide our AI models towards the desired output that we want. So, both of the scenarios there, whether it's a case of utilizing generative AI in order to be able to bridge that output and to provide a solution, or whether we're using generative AI to actually assist us, let's say by analyzing network traffic data and comparing that with new traffic data to check for anomalies, it really does differ depending on what it is that you're really wanting to try and achieve for it. But that starting point and where you need to make sure it all goes down to, which everything falls onto, is that prompt well crafted?
And what are give me some pro tips on for a well crafted prompt?
Well, when we wanted to start to look at a prompt, we need to consider the components of context, instruction, example, and format modifiers. Now, we need to make sure that we provide clear context so that the AI understands the intended task. Now, the context helps us to frame the prompt within the specific domain. It makes sure that the output is accurate to the question. Now, as an example, if you want to generate a summary from recent customer feedback, in your prompt, your context would be to tell your prompt that you are a customer service rep at a technology company. Because now, by building this context around who that prompt is positioning to be, the outcome is going to match that criteria. Now, we also need to ensure we provide direct and clear instructions to guide the AI on how we interpret the response and how we want to make sure that the AI is going to respond to further prompts. Now, the instruction for this should be explicit to outline the desired outcome or the action that's expected from the AI. Again, an example of this is if we needed to, let's say, translate text, our instruction would be to translate the provided text from English into Spanish. It is a strict instruction by stating translate it from English to Spanish rather than just stating translate this text to Spanish. You're being precise in stating what the text is. Now, another one is examples, and by including examples, these help us illustrate these desired responses. Examples will provide instances for the AI to learn from. It helps the model understand the prompt's intent and the desired output which we're after. So a great example here would be if we wanted AI to write us a book. If my prompt is simply write me a book, the output could be anything. However, if I say, write me a story about a character embarking on a quest for automation excellency, the book is going to be guided to this specific narrative. The outcomes are going to be very different. If I run my prompt asking my generative AI model to write me a book 10 times, not giving it any context, I'm going to get 10 very different variations. But by adding my example and the context to this, all of the outputs are going to be around the example that I provided. And finally, of course, we have our format modifiers. And this is going to be really nice for them developers in there and even the people wanting to start kind of learning even new languages. Now, with format modifiers, these specify the desired format or style of the output. So whether it's generating text, images, or code, format modifiers help us tailor the AI's response to meet that specific requirement. So an example is this, is if I needed to develop a Python function, using generative AI, my format modifier would be to provide my output in Python, which means that my output is going to all come through in the programming language that I'm requesting it because I've added my format modifier into the prompt. And if you create your prompt and craft it with these 4 components, you're going to tick the mark and you're going to get a structured output that is not just manageable, but also effective.
No, that's good stuff. As I sort of said at the top, too, the way I look at it is you think about it like an intern or something, right? It's like somebody that's capable, but doesn't have the experience. So you got to be very specific about, to your point, the context and the instruction to get a great output. I'm curious around this idea. Two things. One, audience. I'm curious from you guys. What are you out there testing specifically around? Development with automation or employing generative AI in conjunction with intelligent automation. What have you guys, what cool things are you guys doing? What challenges are you running into? So raise your hands, let us know. But to our esteemed panel, when I think about, Python code or other, say code from more of a developer angle, how easy is it to generate and employ within the framework of, say, the automation success platform or in a specific automation? What are we looking at there?
The whole process is extremely streamlined. If you want to connect through to a generative AI provider, whether it's your simple ChatGPT or whether you're connecting through to Google Vertex, we have the actions within inside our control room already packaged up and ready to go. You can assign your API key in order to be able to connect and send your prompts and receive the response back directly within your automation. Again, if you're wanting to start utilizing the Copilot for Automators, it's as simple as clicking a button at the top. Let's say we want to start integrating Python code that we've just took from our GPT model. Well, all we need to do is copy the Python code from the GPT model and paste it within the Python functions that's already available within automation anyway. It really is as simple as plug and go.
I like that. That makes it easy for somebody like me. And for those of you listening, I'm joking a little bit, but it's not meant to be just a straight ad for our products, of course. But the point I think remains that from a simplicity perspective, as you're starting this journey, as we talked about this idea of table stakes or competitive advantage, which I think it's a competitive advantage right now from what we're seeing with our customers that are deploying today. These are, as we like to say, quick wins, easy places to start. And really effective. So I think there's this idea, and we talked about this with Mark a couple of weeks ago, this idea of quick wins. Quick wins doesn't mean it's just a sort of a simple automation. It could be, but it can also be something that, given the proper scoping and understanding of the sort of problem statement, you can have a massive impact out of the gate, right? And with Doc Auto or Automation Copilot for Automators, you can realize huge gains right away. Let me ask you this. You're talking about framing these prompts and creating the prompts, but you also mentioned at the top, and Micah touched on it as well, but how do we, when we think about automation in particular, right? How do we ensure accuracy and reliability when we're using Gen AI and integrating these prompts into our intelligent automations?
Well, I hate to say it because it's the one task that people seem to not enjoy the most, but it's documentation and building out these prompt libraries. But to build out the prompt libraries, the documentation is key. Now, when you craft a prompt, you should be documenting what works and what doesn't, and ensure that each prompt includes all of the key components that we've just discussed. Now, by building out a library of prompts, it doesn't just allow developers to speed up development by having access to these components, but it also forces a baseline and a standard to the data to ensure that everything is formatted correctly and behaving as it should. It adds a guidance to future prompts. It has people creating prompts with synergy and working together, and it makes sure that then the outcomes are pretty much just in unison. Now, it's important to remember, though, that generative AI isn't this perfect tool. Though outputs can differ. And even when using the same prompts, it is key that when you are integrating generative AI with an automation, you have some sort of validation in place to check on that AI's output. It shouldn't be something that is purely relied upon and have it just run your whole organization. It needs to be monitored, it needs to be viewed to make sure that it is performing as it should do. But again, the documentation behind the prompt stating what does work and what doesn't work means that the prompts that you are using are going to be a suitable fit because they would have been tested properly and documented.
Testing is always the least fun part of building any kind of solution. But Max, I'm curious of your perspectives when it comes to me implementing some kind of generative AI prompt within my automation. What are some tips on making sure I get a response back from these models that my automation can consistently interpret and be able to understand, right? Because it's one thing for me to go to ChatGPT just as the website and ask for a poem, but that comes back in kind of a free form format. So, what are some tips for being able to interpret these responses through my automation?
So it's about being precise with how you want your output to be coming from your automation. You're exactly right. If you start asking GPT open ended questions, you're going to get that open ended response back. So you want to make sure that within your prompt, you are seriously nailing down exactly what it is that you want from that output. An example for this. So let's say we go touch back onto our document automation example, but we've got it all in plain text, luckily, already extracted out. We have multiple addresses, and all I want from there is the specific postcode. Now, if I put through a document that has an address in there, and I say, pass me back the address, or pass me back the full shipping label for it, the label for that that's going to come back is going to be that full address. But if I provide the example of I only want to receive the postcode, the example of the postcode would be NG, so on, so on, so on, so on. I don't want to give away my real postcode there. But by providing the postcode example like that, the model's going to know the data that it is looking for, whether that's going to be the English address or an address overseas by the postcode example that we're providing it. Again, if we're wanting to really add context to make sure that the result that we receive from our prompts is precise, then by making sure that we tell our prompt exactly how we want the output to look, what we want included in the output, and how we want that output structured, that's how it's going to come. Another little example could be, let's say we're working with data that could go into Excel. If we say we need the output to be in a suitable format for Excel, we're going to get a table as a response.
The other thing I'd add on to that is, you talked about giving examples of the data that I want back or the format I want back. I think maybe including something like a JSON structure of exactly how this response should be formatted. And this goes kind of outside of the bounds of doc automation, but if I'm using the generative AI package in Automation Anywhere and I'm making a prompt of a OpenAI model or a model that's hosted on AWS, right? Like, I want to give it beyond just what I'm asking for. I need to give it the structure of how I want that response formatted for me. When I'm using like a regular, let's say, API to do a lookup of a stock, I have a clear, expectation for the format that response is always going to come. But when I'm working with generative AI, I kind of have to establish that response format based on the data that I'm looking for, how I want it arranged, and be able to set that up so that my automation is able to consistently interpret that result. I think another key is, like, if I'm doing something like classification, I want to set up the valid response options, right? If I'm classifying images and it's for a mortgage application, right? Is this a bank statement? Is this a loan document? Is this the application itself? Or is this other, right? Now I've got 4 distinct options that the model can respond to me with, and I can use that to drive my solution forward. And if it goes into that other bucket, then I know maybe I have some additional classifications I have to add, or maybe I want to have a human review that every single time. So I think we want to think of those kind of things as well when we're doing some of this more open-ended stuff.
Oh, 100%. And touching on what you were saying there around the JSON, it's even a case of uploading a specific template. If we already have that JSON template in place, we could insert kind of placeholders for what data we want inserted into the area of that template. And then by passing through the data from our prompt and the template, we can have that template populated for us. Perfect structure for our automation, like you were saying.
Yeah, I like that. We might have lost Gabe again. All right. Well, anyway, yeah, I think this was super helpful. Max, where can people follow up with this from here? Because we've talked about a lot of different concepts. We've talked about a lot of different tools and capabilities. I know that you've been working pretty hard on quite a bit of generative AI training that we have freely available on AAU. Can you talk a little bit about that? I know this is not supposed to be just like a promo for that, but the lessons that we've talked about here and a lot of the examples, I think, are further reinforced through hands-on exercises and training that you've developed.
100%. Happily. So, like you said, we do have an entire generative AI learning trail. And honestly, we've only got plans to actually let that grow. So, a few of the ones that we actually have on there, ones such as persona modeling for report automation. And in this one, we learn about advanced strategies for personalizing reports and enhancing user engagement. And to go along with this, we have the persona modeling with Copilot and generative AI exercise. Now, this is hands on, where we revolutionize complaint handling processes with Automation Anywhere and generative AI for optimized efficiency and customer satisfaction. So, this allows you to be able to tailor outputs, change the way they read, and change the way of the information is actually projected to the customer based on some very minor tweaks. But I'm not going to give them away. I'm going to let you do the course and find out which ones they are. Another one we have is natural language processing for data extraction and analysis, where we explore how natural language processing drives automation in customer support and data processing. And of course, we have one that goes over best practices of handling sensitive information through generative AI and Automation Anywhere. Here we master data protection and compliance protocols for secure automation development. But that is only to name a few. At the moment, there's just over 13 courses just on generative AI available on there. And like I said, this is only going to grow. So I'd definitely take a look at that if you haven't already.
I think that this idea of the privacy, we know this is a big deal. This is why enterprises and various industries are, somewhat hesitant, and they're trying to figure out how to get. And this is why our partners like AWS and GCP are coming up with very model specific, with specific models for industry and whatnot around protecting, customer and patient information in healthcare in banking, for instance. Super. The course sounds super interesting. So I wonder, are you going to be doing more around this idea of privacy in particular?
So the course that we've got in play, it goes over aspects of how you'd want to protect yourself both from an automation perspective when working with these models, and also how you'd want to really protect yourself from using these large language models with your data. And it is definitely a perfect starting point to go through kind of the fundamentals before really getting involved with anything using generative AI.
I think it's, what I'm reminded of as we're going through this conversation is these core principles are always applicable. Micah mentioned it at the top. When you were starting your automation program, there was, best practices and approaches that are, foundational. And I think those don't change with a new technology like Gen AI, right? These things are consistent, and they're best practices for a reason, right?
Absolutely. And I think on top of that, we want to be thinking about those same things that most people missed when they got started with their automation program, right? Like, what are the metrics I should be focused on? And how do I report out on the success and the impact of our generative AI powered automations? We don't want to answer the question, what have you been doing with your automation program? As in, we have implemented 5 automations that have generative AI. Cool. That's a metric, but what really matters is what's the impact of those? Is it making people's jobs easier? Is it making the organization able to transact more quickly, more accurately? Are we auditing a greater percentage of our transactions now? So we want to be thinking about those kind of metrics that we can report out on that really matter and that demonstrate the impact of our delivered solutions.
I see some familiar faces out in the crowd, some MVPs and some others. I'm giving them a little poke here. I want to get their take on, some of their best practices, some of the things that they've tried. So raise your hands, guys. And for those of you that are either new to the program or maybe haven't raised your hand before, take this opportunity to ask your questions or let us know what you've been working on. Lots of information, lots at hand here. In as the team, has alluded to, whether it's AAU, whether it's some of our YouTube demos, whether it's just the community in general. Encourage you guys to go, take advantage of those resources. Obviously, as always, Max and Micah and myself, we're all here to help. So connect with us on LinkedIn if you want to. If you have a specific question, put it in the feed if you want sort of groupthink and engagement there. But we're here to help. So let us know what we can do. Unless Micah, you've got a block on. You're blocking people from, taking new connections.
I'm putting every time there's a hand up, I put it back down. No, I'm happy to answer questions. I think this is only just the beginning of this kind of conversation. Like I mentioned before, we will be diving much deeper into this with very specific use case examples and breakdowns at Imagine. So if this is an area of interest for you, I would prioritize making your way to Austin is it June? Yeah, June.
Yep.
Because we're already working on this entire framework that I shared and some very specific examples and specific guidance on how you should get started, how you can think about maturing and how you think about doing this at scale. So we'll be sharing that at Imagine. We didn't want to give it all away right now, but yeah, that will be a fun thing we're still working on, and I'm excited to share that.
Yeah, it's gonna be amazing. I mean, last year was fantastic. I think just the energy and the just the swelling of the capabilities and what we're going to announce and what people are doing. I can't wait to experience that and get that hands-on get hands-on with it with our community and with our customers and partners. It's gonna be fantastic. That said, before Imagine, as you mentioned, we're also going to be at Google Next in April.
That's right. And we will be doing, like I said, a Gen AI build that we've been working on. We also have a couple sessions on one that we cleverly named AI Alchemy, and how to actually get started making your generative AI solutions a reality. So I'll be leading a session on that at Google Next, which I'm looking forward to. And yeah, connecting with anyone in our developer user community who's going to be at Google Next will be great to catch up, and we'll do some bot game stuff and hang out at the Automation Anywhere booth.
So if you're going to Google Next or your colleagues are going to Google Next, send them by the booth. We'll be there. Micah has volunteered to be a selfie. What do you call it? Like a selfie cutout? We're gonna maybe we'll get a selfie cutout for you, Micah. So while you're doing your session, people can still get a selfie with you. And Max, maybe we'll get one for you too.
Sounds like a plan.
And Max, you're coming across the pond, right? To go to Google Next as well.
What was that? Sorry.
You're coming to Vegas?
Oh, I am indeed. I'm going to be they're ready by our booth. I'm practicing my sign spinning skills to try and advertise everyone to our bot games Lightning.
Love it. We're gonna see Max out on the strip with like his spinner and his little bike with the trailer on it. What do you call those little things?
Oh gosh, I'm not too sure, Gabe, but you're going to be in the back of the trailer. I hope you're ready.
Yeah, I'm there for you. I'm there for you. We'll be up and down the strip getting all kinds of people's attention. Gents, it's been a pleasure. To our audience, thank you again for joining us. As usual, tons of information, tons of resources. We'll put links to what's available in the feed here. But hope you enjoyed this. I think probably to Micah's point, we've got an opportunity to maybe dive in further on future sessions. We've got a couple exciting sessions coming up, so be on the lookout for those for our next LinkedIn Audio events. But again, Micah, Max, thank you for the time. Thank you for the insights. Thank you for all of the info. And I hope everybody has a great weekend. We will talk to you soon.
Happy days. Thank you, everyone. And thanks for having me.
Cheers.